Hello, everyone, and welcome to Heart and Hand, the Rangers podcast. My name is Cameron Bell. I am your host for your extra show for the week, and it is my pleasure to be able to introduce my guest for this week, Mr. Ross Hutton. Ross, thank you so much for coming on. Not spoken to you for a couple of weeks. A pleasure to have you on, as always, my friend.
I was going to say, Cammy, that's the voice of a man who's been sunning himself in Mexico for a fortnight, if I've ever heard it. But no, thank you very much, mate. It's good to have you not only back on Extra, but back in the country as well. So thanks very much for having me on.
Yeah, no worries, no worries. Had to record last week's extra across in Mexico, where it was significantly warmer, and not just in terms of the weather, but also to have Gary Gillan on as well. Gary, a great guest, and thank you so much for his time as well. But I seem to have brought the weather back with me a little bit, Ross. It's been a wee bit kind of brighter, so this might be our week of summer in Scotland this week, and then it will be back to dour, rain, snow, sleet, etc. for the next 9 months.
It's unseasonably warm here in Glasgow, and for anyone who lives abroad, and you can imagine what Glasgow should be like in your mind in September, it's not been like that at all. It's been fantastic. If we had this weather a month ago, you'd say it's a great summer. But yes, thank you very much, Cam. It's a good wee gift to come back to.
Yeah, absolutely. And the sun continued to shine in Ibrox, Ross, as we are heading back to the stadium for the first time this season on Saturdays. I'm going to say Saturday afternoon, technically afternoon, because it's a 5:30 kickoff in our next Scottish League Cup game against Dundee. We will obviously talk about that in due order as well. But how are you feeling about coming back to Ibrox? It's going to be a little bit of a weird atmosphere, I think, because obviously there's still some displacement. I don't think we'll be back to the full experience until Hibs the following week, but it'll just be great to get back into the stadium. I think we've spoken long and weary about Hampden. None of us enjoyed the experience, I don't really think, but nothing will beat going home.
No, of course not. And I think you don't want to retread old ground, like you said, about the Hampden conversations, but I think weariness with Hampden was reflected in attendances at games, and it is really that simple. You think of the game against Dino O'Keefe, for example, the entire east stand of Hampden basically being empty, bar a few. You had the cup game the previous round there as well that wasn't greatly attended. So I do think getting back to Ibrox, as much as I've seen a few spare tickets going about for the game on Saturday, and I do believe that the club are still trying to shift some as well, it gives us as fans a much needed boost, because I'm not sure we would have been able to sustain a prolonged period at Hampden longer than was what was duly necessary. And to be fair to the club, obviously it's not ideal having to go through that at the start of the season, but having made the announcement, they have got us back to Ibrox relatively promptly after the delay. I don't think I was alone in believing that this experience at Hampden and this temporary residency might have dragged on into October, or God forbid even November. So to be back mid-September, it's not a complete disaster, but I think for everyone it just gives us a boost, players and fans alike.
Yeah, and as I say, we will talk about that shortly, but I don't want to revisit too much in terms of what the boys covered in Flagship on Monday in terms of the Dundee United game. But Ross, I'm keen to kind of get your thoughts in terms of, probably with a bit of a view to what the team will be on Saturday afternoon. I'll be honest with you, I've now had the chance to be able to watch the game back. I think as David mentioned, it's always different when you're watching a game live and you have that tension and a bit of that kind of fear of it's a 1-goal advantage. It could bite you in the arse at any point. It has done in the recent past with us. But having watched it back, I think we've certainly played better than I thought we did in real time. I think it's easy to dismiss where we've had some good periods of play because we obviously talk about how we sustain it. I think for me, it reinforced the fact that this Rangers team is capable of playing good football. There's a lot of turbulence to it at the moment, and it sounds crazy to say, but as we've just mentioned there, there will be players who have played for Rangers now for a good few games, have never played in our home stadium. That, for me, is just one factor when we talk about how this Rangers team has had to find some degree of structure and to be able to try and gel in some relationships. Then you take into account injuries and everything else as well, which obviously we certainly don't have any issues finding. But looking back on that Dundee performance a few days afterwards, how are you feeling about it now? Are you a little bit more reassured that there was some some indicators there about a style of play and a little bit of a blueprint.
I believe what you said there about this Rangers team being capable of playing good football is absolutely correct, but at the same time, I don't really think that's news. I think we've been aware of that for a while, even in Clement's early kind of tenure as Rangers manager. There was some really good patches of play there, but that's a problem, Cammy. It's just patches of play. We don't seem to be able to sustain it for 90 minutes, let alone a period of 3, 4, 5 games. And I'm not one of those fans that believes that you can play at your absolute maximum in every single game over the course of a season. We play far too many games of football for that to be a realistic possibility. The best teams can't sustain a high octane level of performance right the way from start to finish in this season. It's not possible. But I do believe that Rangers should be good enough to sustain that for a couple of months of the season, or in high pressure games in the season. We should be able to go up a gear, whereas we don't really seem to be seeing much of a body of evidence to suggest that we can do that yet. But as I say, in those patches when we look good, we do look very good. And I was a wee bit worried going into the game against Dundee United that the Rangers team might come out the traps in their shells a wee bit, because it wasn't just a bruising Old Firm loss, it was a bruising month in August, if we're being honest. Coming out of that being 4 points behind Celtic with was it 4 or 5 points behind Celtic at the time, and a 3-0 Old Firm loss in there, plus obviously going out of the Champions League qualifiers in the manner that we did, Cammy. It's been a bruising month, and given what we know of what some of those players can be like, I was a wee bit concerned that they would start that game with a wee bit of temerity at Tannadice. It didn't really seem to be that way. We came out and played really, really well for the first 20-25 minutes. I was very impressed with us. But again, it's that same story about not being able to keep that level of performance up. Dundee United crept back into the game without ever really looking threatening themselves. But when you don't get that killer second goal, you always leave yourself open to a more nervy finish to the game than what was necessary there. And I think that's a big frustration for me, is that we weren't able to either sustain the performance or get the second goal that would completely kill it. And then we left ourselves open to something going wrong in the last 20 minutes where they can nick an equaliser. There was that effort that took a deflection, just went round the right side of the post from our point of view. On another day, very easily could have just crept in the inside of the post, and then we're talking about another poor performance and drop points, because, as we all know, Cammy, it's the result that dictates all of this conversation and all of this chat. I don't think it's realistic to think after the month that we just came off the back of that we would go from 0 to 100 and come out and play sparkling football. But I would like to have seen a wee bit more in terms of just being able to sustain that intensity and have the quality in the final third to go and actually kill the game. But as I say, that's not news.
No, it's not. And I think the other thing that I have been thinking about since Sunday as well, Ross, is, again, we take into account the fact that we have had, as we mentioned before, some of those players and some of the moving parts that have been involved in terms of those guys who are literally just in the door. And I'll get your thoughts on some of them in just a moment. The injuries that were spoken about, so some guys have come in, I think they've done pretty well in sports, and then no our luck, obviously, they pick up a knock and what have you. I do want to get your thoughts in terms of what you saw from our back four, because as much as you mentioned there about getting the killer second goal, there's obviously been a big part to that where we want to make sure that we're solid at the back, and there's definitely been some questions around that. Parkhead, I think you have to take out of it in isolation, because you're playing against a Celtic team that's flying. They're going to be full of confidence. They're at home. All of that noise. So, and again, for me, I thought I was a bit critical at the time when I was looking at probably more for Robin Proper in terms of some of his positioning. Watching it back, maybe I was a little bit too critical of him. It feels a lot to me now that we need to be able to try and get a settled back four as best we can. I don't want to dominate this conversation again about James Tavernier, because I think we have spoken about him, a lot, and we know where the gaps are. And I will be curious again, as I say, to get your thoughts about whether he'll be involved on Saturday as well against Dundee. But by and large, we need to make sure that we've got a settled back four that knows where they are, understands a little bit of kind of relationship building within it as well. Jeffrey, I thought, was really good on Sunday, but just more so because I think positionally he knew exactly where to be. I don't think he had to make much recovery in terms of being a little bit out of place and then having to get back in and then creating some opportunities for Dundee United to get some joy down our left-hand side. I thought he was solid, and I really like the way he moves forward with the ball. I think he always looks to be able to try and create, which is fantastic. But overall, a centre-half pairing which can just start to continue to build. And clean sheets will definitely help that. We know that. Jack Butland, I don't think, has had a fantastic start to the season. But these incremental wins, being able to go up to Tannadice, where we know it's a tough venue because, again, like I say, the crowd are right on top of you. Dundee United had obviously had a good run of form in the build-up to this. But again, we can't overlook that opportunity to go and just give the guys a little bit of confidence, a little bit of sustainability. Clean sheets definitely help that for sure. But the other thing I'm thinking of a slightly longer term beyond this weekend is, when we start the European campaign, things will have to move up a level. So those defenders will be called upon a lot more than we would expect domestically. But it's important that we start to acknowledge where some of those marginal gains have been as well.
Yeah, absolutely. I think the point on the back four is that they looked a wee bit more solid and a wee bit more settled against Dundee United, which I was really happy to see. And as much as I'm saying that Dundee United didn't really create anything of note over the 90 minutes, I think our back four, and in particular Hefty, had a massive say in the reason why they weren't able to do that. We're really impressed by Hefty so far, surprisingly so. Actually, I think I might have had a wee bit of a preconceived notion about him before he came to the club in terms of he'd be quite good going forward and a wee bit gallus, actually, which I think we do need. But I wasn't entirely sure about him defensively in the clips that I'd seen. But really, there wasn't actually that many of them. All the clips that Hefty seemed to be about him going forward and driving with the ball. Now, the way that Rangers play, and 80-90% of the games that we will play domestically, that is what you need. I don't think you can be a fullback at a club like Rangers with the amount of ball that we have without having some kind of strong attacking presence, and he definitely does have that. But he is also quite good in the tackle. He's very good at reading the game. He's good positionally. He doesn't really tend to be caught out. I think Cortez maybe could have done him one or two more favours on Sunday in terms of coming back and helping track runners and giving him a wee bit of assistance. But he held his own very, very well. So he's a player that I've been really quietly excited about since he started playing games. Maybe getting a bit of a reputation now as being a walking yellow card. That's a few bookings he's had. But listen, if it's part and parcel of the game for a defender to take those yellow cards and he's doing it in such a way that means he's helping the team defend, then I'm not going to be too critical about that. Robin Proper has maybe looked at times like a guy who's been a wee bit spooked by what he's come into, but again, to be fair, he's came into a bit of a bin fire. Somebody who maybe had a wee bit of an inauspicious start himself to his Rangers career, that very unfortunate own goal in his debut, for example. However, again, I think he looked a wee bit more assured on Sunday against Dundee United. There is still maybe a question there about Robin Proper in the air and reading high balls, which is not great given our very, very poor record of dealing with high balls. But his actual day-to-day defending, as you would like to call it, yeah, I think he's good. I don't think he's anything massively spectacular. He's hardly an absolute godsend answer to our defensive problems, but yeah, I think he's going to be a good signing for us. The point you made there as well, Cammy, about relationship building is absolutely vital for me. I was kind of toing and throwing in my head about the upcoming game on Saturday against Dundee about would you give Tab a rest perhaps? Would you maybe try something different there at right back? I think if we are determined to go with that back four as our settled back four going forward, and by that I mean Tav, Suter, Proper and Hefty, then maybe at this stage of the season it actually is more beneficial to give them minutes together and to continue to build that relationship dynamic in a game setting, because it's obviously, as we all know, one thing doing it day to day in training, it's another thing entirely doing it in a live match. So maybe for me, just keeping that back four, back five if you include Butland, settled for the next period, just to try and build that stability, build that relationship between the five of them. I think that's probably the way I would go.
I can hear David Edgar listening to this going, start calling him Jeffy, because I think he pulled up Colin McMillan for it as well. But
I thought Colin was calling him Hefty. I thought Hefty was the right pronunciation of it. Listen, when we get to a couple of the other new boys, I'm going to absolutely butcher their names as well. Hefty's going to be the absolute least of our worries.
I know. Well, let's talk about that then, because I do want to get your thoughts on the right back position. We'll talk about that in terms of the team for Dundee, because I have said for a long time, Ross, that I believe that James Tavernier needs a rest. He played well enough on Sunday. I don't want to criticise that, but when you look at the start of the season to now, and probably toward the tail end of last season as well, he, we have spoken a lot about his overall performances. He has always been, for me, Ross, without any period where he's been injured, a mainstay within that team. And whilst that is absolutely to be commended, and it really is, by the way, right? I cannot fault the fact that he genuinely doesn't ever say to the manager, it's a cup game or an early stage cup game. I could probably do with missing it out, blah blah. I want to keep playing. I want to continue to perform, and you absolutely have to take your hat off to that. There's an element of this where he does get overutilized. Now, on Sunday afternoon, there was, I think, I was watching it on the TV. I think you were as well, where there was an attempt, I think, at potentially bringing him off towards the dying minutes of the game to be played with Casemiro. That didn't happen. That didn't materialise. But I'm keen to get your thoughts as to whether or not Casemiro should probably start on Saturday against Dundee. My tuppence worth is that I absolutely think he should. I think that it's a good game to be able to bring him into to make his debut for Rangers. I think that it will help give James Tavernier a rest. And so I'm not suggesting I want Casemiro to replace him permanently at this point in time, but I still think it would provide value to that. I would say, again, from that perspective, if he's able to, then I think he should play the 90. He obviously was involved with Feyenoord, prior to coming to Rangers, so he has played already so far this season. What's your opinion on whether or not the Tavernier gets a little bit of a rest and we can just give him a bit of a breather? Do you feel it's merited, or at this point in time, is it trying to maintain that stability that we've just mentioned of that back five and just keep it as it is at the moment?
As I said in my last answer, Cammy, I'm not sure I would jump immediately to messing about with the back five as it is. Mate, it's actually quite harsh on Liam Kelly as well, not just Casemiro. I hope I'm pronouncing that right. Because these are players who are obviously coming into the club and they will want game time, particularly now that we are at Ibrox. I'm not adverse to giving them 30 minutes. Say if we manage to put the game to bed, that would be a novel and fun concept, Cammy. But if we put the game to bed early and you do want to see a wee bit of squad rotation in there, then yeah, that would become the absolute perfect opportunity to give them minutes and introduce them into the team and obviously to the fans as well. The other thing we need to be mindful of on Saturday is that this isn't Elgin we're playing at Ibrox, right? No disrespect, it's a Premiership club who gave us a bloody nose at the tail end of last season, and a club who have had an own decent start to the season. Obviously, they had a poor result up at Dingwall in the last round of the games, but before that, I'd been playing well. It made a decent start, so you don't want to be too flippant in terms of the way that you're setting the team up on Saturday or the personnel that you're picking for the game. And as I said, I think maybe at this stage of the season, despite the fact that Tav hasn't had a great start himself, I think he'd probably be the first to admit that, despite the fact that he is getting older and probably shouldn't be playing the volume of games that he has done in the past. At this early stage of the season, I wouldn't be adverse to just keeping the back five as it is and hopefully building that dynamic, because the hope is now, Cammy, if you put in the hard yards to build those relationships, that will hopefully pay dividends in the next part of the season when we're hopefully going for trophies and at the kind of tail end of things. In Europe as well, coming up, there's going to be games thick and fast. It's not as though other players in the squad aren't going to be able to get game time should they want it. So just for now, just let's not rock the boat too much, and maybe being a wee bit conservative there, but I don't mind that.
Yeah, I think you are, if I'm being honest. And I do understand it. It's not criticism. I think it's just more, I'm hoping that we wouldn't have to have a huge concerted effort against Dundee. You're right in terms of they've had a decent start to the season, and I'm not trying to be disrespectful towards them in as much as I also don't want to overrate them, and the fact that I think we do have enough in the tank to be able to beat them. I think that we'll have a natural boost from obviously being back at Ibrox for the first time this season. And my hope is when you start to take in all of those factors, we shouldn't have too much of a contest in our hands. I think the thing for me, and I've said this for a long time, right? This is not just about how James Tavernier is playing at the moment. I've said this previously. I've said this before, when we talked about Gerrard being here and playing Alfredo Morelos in cup games where he didn't really need it. I always think that when you've got the home advantage, for sure, but also when you're playing against a team that you know that you should be able to beat pretty comfortably, all things considered, that you can look at being able to try and make some potential changes. So yeah, I personally would like to see Casemiro given a start on Saturday. I want to move a little bit.
I was going to say, Cammy, there's kind of two things to that for me. So the first part about what you said regarding we shouldn't have to overexert ourselves to beat Dundee at Ibrox under any circumstances. You're correct. You're absolutely spot on there. But that then refers back to what I said way back at the start of the show with regards to the fact that we are not in a position yet to be taking these kind of games for granted, because we are still trying to rebuild trust and rebuild confidence after a really, really rocky month in August. And that starting games timidly, that feature of wanting to take baby steps all the time when we're on the pitch, that could creep back in at any kind of given point if the boat is rocked too much. Now, I came out after the Old Firm and I'd said that I would be quite happy to see the manager drop Tav. And there's a part of me that still stands by that. But also, if the manager has committed to keeping Tav as the captain and has committed to keeping Tav as his starting right back, then he should commit to it fully and not start chopping and changing all over the shop, because that is when instability does start to breed mistakes. And I think that's the concern going forward. So I think if you were going to drop Tav and make a statement, I'm not saying anyone's dropping him, quote unquote, for the game on Saturday, by the way, but if you were going to go down that route, then that would have started on Sunday there. We've not went down that route. Right, fine, I don't pick the team, but commit to it now and really go all in on it, because that's ultimately what the manager's paid to do.
Well, that's the thing, and that's what is interesting to me, is because the manager will definitely be aware of the sentiment around the club at the moment, right? I don't believe for a single minute. And I know that he'll come out and he'll always give the typical stock answers of, we concentrate on the team and it's my job to pick the team, and whatever else happens around the club externally, I can't control that. And he is right, by the way. I'm not saying that he's wrong in saying that, but he's never going to come out and openly admit and go, yeah, I'm aware of the fact that there's a number of factors at the club just now which are borderline shambolic. And as a result of that, I need to consider what's going on. He's going to have a think about, and he said it before, when we talk about it's one game at a time, he's made mention to the fact that cup games are like sprints, leagues like a marathon. And that's totally right, by the way. I absolutely buy into that. But he's also going to be aware of, I don't want to ruin this idea of trying to build a bit of momentum, being able to try and get into the next stages of the League Cup, being able to get a couple of good performances under our belt, being able to take that into the next game against Hibs, and then obviously we talk about the Europa League kicking off, all of that kind of stuff. So I think that you're right. I think there is an element where he'll think, I just need to be able to maintain some consistency. But one of the things, and again, I want to kind of get your thoughts on this as well, is, I think for me, a really strong performance from Egeman on Sunday when he came on at half time. Sorry, I beg your pardon, with 25 to go. Replacing Cyril Dessers. Keen to be able to try and see Egeman start. Dessers, I know we have spoken about Cyril Dessers a lot, and I will keep this as to a minimum. Wasn't a happy chappy, I think, getting taken off, Ross. And there's a part of me which I don't mind that. I think if you've got a player who's been able to be delighted to go off after he's had a mixed game, shall we say. And I know that he's got his detractors and he's got his promoters, I understand all of that, but he's the proverbial Marmite. I didn't really mind his performance on Sunday, if I'm being honest. I think, he set up the goal, obviously, for Tom Lawrence. He should have scored his goal just before half-time. Egeman, for me, provides something completely different, but I liked him. I thought he was lively. I've probably waxed lyrical about this, and you'll probably be sick of hearing it if we've been talking about it in our chats and stuff, but the weighted pass that he gave to Tom Lawrence, for me, for a chance that he should have scored, was a thing of absolute beauty. And I know just talking about something that should be relatively simplistic, but we haven't seen it. So when we did see it, it was an absolute sight to behold. But he is, for me, came on a half-hour performance, give or take, that just looked like he slotted in perfectly. And even for, again, for a player making his, making a debut for Rangers in what I felt was a pretty tough game to come into, to step into at that point. For 21 years old, I thought he showed an excellent footballing brain as well. A couple of times he had it down in the corner. Could have looked to be able to produce something, just manage the game really well. And again, sounds incredibly simple, but that's something that we've missed. Over the last few years, is just someone just to realise, actually, I could do something a little bit smarter here. What's your thoughts on whether or not you'd like to see him feature on Saturday?
Yeah, it seems to be the case that good things come to those who wait, doesn't it? Because God knows we've been made to wait to see this young lad, but I've liked everything that I've seen from him so far, and I'm so happy that you mentioned his football intelligence there, Cammy, because there was a point, I think it was a 92nd minute.
I also misspoke as well, Ross, because he did play at Parkhead. I completely forgot about
No,
that.
no,
But in my defence, I was pretty drunk in the all-inclusive by that stage, so please forgive me, listeners. But yeah, sorry, I do beg your pardon. So his second game for Rangers.
Yeah, I'm not sure anyone's going to want to revisit that game enough, Cammy, to go on and correct you, so don't worry about that. But yeah, sorry, I was going to say I'm really happy that you mentioned his footballing intelligence there, because I believe it was 92nd minute and he had the ball, had maybe an opportunity to get his head up, run into the box or try and find someone, but nope, we're a goal up away from home, take it into the corner, son. I was so happy to see that, and I think that for me it's again a very, very limited body of evidence that we have for the young kid, but it did show a level of maturity there, because I think for a lot of young guys coming to a club of this size, second game, really you can probably just discount Parkhead, to be honest, because of the nature of that game when it came on. You could absolutely understand if a young player wanted to try and go and make an impression on everybody and go and score this mad, fantastic solo goal in the dying embers of a game to claim the points. No, I'd much rather see what Eggman ended up doing in that situation, which is just play it safe, see the game out, do something for the team and not yourself. I was very, very impressed with that. And that pass that you spoke about, the touch, the turn, the control, the weight of the pass, I'm really trying not to be harsh here or hypercritical, Cammy, but I can't remember seeing Dessers do that once for us in the, 18 months almost that we've been watching him for. I really can't remember that happening once. So he maybe does bring a different dynamic to the team than what we currently have in our strikers. Obviously, Dessers, you do know what you're getting from him. Now he is hot and cold. He will contribute over the course of a season. He will score goals, but then you do have performances like Sunday where nothing is sticking. He doesn't finish his dinner and he becomes a bit of a wasted jersey. Danilo is at the opposite end of the extreme. I still don't really know what we get from Danilo, bar a medical bill from Ross Hall every other month, because we don't have, I keep using these words, this body of evidence to come back and say, all right, okay, he will score goals over a prolonged period of time and stay fit for that as well. It just hasn't been the case so far. So if the young lad can stay fit, and he can get these minutes under his belt, then yeah, absolutely, I think he does have potential with us, and he should be one of the players that we should be looking to give a start to on Saturday, because I think he's earned it. Dessers had started the season reasonably well. He had been scoring goals. I don't want to rewrite history and anything like that. But we're in a position now where I would feel comfortable giving Eggman a start on Saturday. And it's not like the back five conundrum where I'm saying that should be completely settled to build those relationships. I think we can't be constantly relying on Dessers in the way that we have been, the way that we've had to over the last couple of months. But as I say, you know what you're getting there. It's not really anything new to anyone. Allowing Eggman the chance to go in and develop those relationships and partnerships himself will be massively beneficial to us, particularly now that Danilo won't be available for another couple of weeks again. So you can't be relying on him to come in and do a job. So if you want to be able to have that variation in attack and be able to diversify how you go forward, then giving him a start on Saturday would be a really positive step to do that. And I think fans would really welcome that as well. It'll be really exciting, and I think we've all liked what we've seen from him so far. So to continue that on Saturday, I think would give everyone a boost again.
Well, I am going to challenge you a little bit in the controversial stakes here, right? Because I understand, and listen, your points have been brilliant, right? Really valid, and I agree with the majority of them, except the James Tavernier one. But I am going to potentially kill our listening figures at the moment because I'm going to make a statement and I want to be able to back it up a little bit with evidence, okay? So for me, on Saturday afternoon, I would start Kieran Dowell. I'm just going to leave a little pause there for people to lower their eyebrows after hearing that statement. But the reason why I would do it, Ross, all joking aside, is because I struggle to understand what Kieran Dowell brings to the team. I do. However, I would start Kieran Dowell against Dundee because I think, firstly, it's clear the manager does see something in him. I don't know what that is. I don't know anyone who knows what that is, but I trust the manager to make those decisions. But the reason being is because I don't also, for the same reason I've spoken about James Tavernier, I don't want to overplay guys who I know who have played a lot of football up to this point. Now, where or how Kieran Dowell fits within that team, I think is going to be really interesting if he does start them on Saturday. But I think about some of the other midfielders that have been involved within there. If we've got, for example, if we bring a player in on the right-hand side, which is where I think we've kind of shunted Dowell out to a little bit at the moment. But I would involve him purely because I think it would give other players a little bit of a rest. Now, the manager's done things like this before where he has looked to be able to try and bring on some of his game changers midway through the game, midway through the second half or whatever. He's also been slightly pragmatic in terms of his approach. He obviously does rate Dowell, so I think that he will feature at some point on Saturday. But for me, I just think that he should play a decent amount of the game because if the manager is going to use him going forward, and I think if we start our European campaign, we're going to get into the stage of 2 games a week, etc., then we're going to have to utilise them to some capacity. But I think for me, Saturday afternoon gives them a little bit of a chance to play him and use his resources around the squad, and in turn, just I think, like you say, just even give him a little bit of a confidence boost, being able just to try and give him a little bit of a platform on which to build. I don't want to see him play against Hibs. I don't want to see him playing against Malmo or Leon or whatever. But on Saturday, I think again sticking with that philosophy of it's a cup game that against an opposition that you should be able to beat pretty in a pretty straightforward manner. Personally, I would involve Dowell for a large period of the game.
Oh, you done a good job trying to defend that.
By the way, for anyone who hasn't had a chance to listen to it, we also run a debate show on our Patreon site. I'm almost wondering if I've just come up with a topic there, Ross, just by myself.
I was going to say, that does sound like one of those debate shows that you're given the point of view to then go and try and argue. And to be fair, let's say hats off to you. You've done a reasonable job of attempting it. No, I can't. Sorry, I can't. I was listening to the post-match as well after the game on Sunday, and I think everyone kind of agreed that Dill was a bit of a non-event because that's just what he is at Rangers. He is a non-event, and no harm to the guy whatsoever. Seems a lovely bloke in interviews. I'm sure he's great to have around the place, yada yada. But I'm wanting more from our players in attacking positions, and I think it would be quite poor of me, someone who's been really critical of our options in attacking areas and our quality in attacking areas and our output from those attacking areas, to then say, let's play this guy who offers you virtually nothing in attacking areas. If it's a case of playing him on the right hand side, I'd much rather give those minutes to Ross McCausland still. I know Ross McCausland is starting to divide opinion a wee bit more. I would still argue completely that it's not his fault he's had to play the amount of games that he's had, but I do think he offers you more.
But in that point, though, probably just to give myself a little bit of standing, I would argue that I would rather play Ross McCausland against, and again, I'll pay whatever respect I have to with Dundee here, but I think Ross McCausland could feature in some of the slightly tougher games. Do you know what I mean? Like, that's probably where I would absolutely play Ross McCausland on the right-hand side. Because,
I get that.
Do you know what I mean?
That in terms of wanting to give other players the rest. I do get the thinking behind it, right, completely. However, I do also believe that Ross McCausland could possibly benefit from the minutes and the legs himself, actually, and get him up to the level of sharpness again after not playing for a few weeks. So when we do go into these big European games and touch wood, I don't jinx anything, tougher opposition as well, then he's a wee bit more game ready for that. I do get that. And you're right as well. Listen, we need to kind of face the fact that Dill will feature over the next few months. Amanda clearly does seem to like him, and we're in a position where we're going to be playing those 2 games a week, and the volume is going to increase, and therefore you're going to have to use the squads of which he is a part. So I do completely agree with the need to give him minutes at some point, but it just kind of feels as though you'd be rewarding him for a pretty hat-trick performance last Sunday. And again, it's not like the back five thing. We need to build those relationships, and you want to keep a bit of stability there and much more at ease with bringing players in and out of attacking positions, because you're trying to build some kind of cohesion there. And I don't think he's anywhere close to being a cohesive attacking player. And as I said before as well, I'm really not wanting to discount the threat that Dundee might have on Saturday. I'm not trying to big them up as some Real Madrid Mark II or anything like that, so please nobody think that I am. But as I say, I'd rather just get this game done early, and I think for us to be able to give players who do bring a bit of attacking threat into the starting lineup, and to be able to go and hopefully kill that game early doors, and yeah, you can start resting players and putting on Kieran Tierney to go be a water boy, whatever you want to do, but maybe not from the start.
Yeah, very fair. Very fair. Like you say, I mean, I don't expect anyone who's still listening to this have probably turned it off, but hopefully people realise what I mean in terms of, if he's going to be a utility player, then utilise him in the games which you would hope that you've got more than enough in other areas to be able to kind of contribute. And I think, as we've mentioned already, that left-hand side, if he does play Jeff Day and Cortez, then there should be enough there to be able to produce. And, let's not forget, Bajrami could also play within that aspect as well. In terms of centre mid, Ross, have you got a preference in terms of what you would like to see in there? I'll maybe take your point into consideration here about, let's not underestimate Dundee, because I think we've kind of talked about that a little bit, and you're absolutely right. I think that if we underestimate Dundee, we're going to underestimate the League Cup, because we'll be out of it if we don't do it properly, which I'm sure we will. But a centre mid for me probably needs to be pretty strong in order to be able to dictate the control and the flow of the game. I'm struggling a little bit here to think about whether or not we should tinker with that too much.
I'd be surprised. I wouldn't be tempted to. I think Diamandi and Barron, for instance, are building up a really good relationship between the two of them. Barron has had a really good start to his career at Rangers. I think he was one of our better players on Sunday and managed to frustrate Dundee United really well in terms of just winning the ball back and not doing anything particularly glamorous, but God knows you miss it when it's not there, and that's a wee bit of my worry and concern if you have to start moving that about, because as much as I'm saying he started well at Rangers, you do want to again build up that consistency, keep those relationships and dynamics growing. It's not something I'd be tempted to completely jump right in and start mucking about with on Saturday. I wouldn't be surprised to see Tom Lawrence drop out the starting lineup, not because he had a bad game on Sunday at all. He was our man of the match and scored an absolutely fantastic goal. Should have had a hat-trick at least, I believe, on Saturday. But again, we've now got Bajrami there too, somebody who's coming into play. Saturday's the kind of game that you would maybe look at and think, okay, in terms of introducing him to Ibrox and introducing him to the team from the start, that's a good game to do it, because we're going to want him to be fit and sharp for the European games coming as well. And on kind of Tom Lawrence, he's an asset to Rangers. I've said this before. I actually really do like Tom Lawrence. I think he offers us something. I think you correctly assessed on the post-match camera he is a moments player. The problem we've had is because we've not had anyone else to interchange him with in that number 10 role, is that we've been asking for a lot of those moments for a guy who doesn't have the body to cope with it and doesn't have the record of fitness to be able to cope with it either. The hope is that now Bajrami's here, he can take over the mantle and be the starting number 10 week in, week out, and he's a very good creative player himself. But then if you are in a position where you're getting to 60, 70 minutes and you're looking for something a wee bit different, I think Tom Lawrence would be a really cracking player to bring on in those scenarios, because he's another one with a fantastic level of football intelligence, really good at unlocking a defence, can go and have those mazy runs like he demonstrated on Sunday. So I'd be maybe tempted to give him a wee bit of a breather, because we have asked him to do an awful lot since the start of the season, and more crucially from our point of view, give Bajrami that start.
Yep. Listen, all I think fair points. Like you say, I expect a lot of criticism for becoming president of the Kieran Tierney fan club, but I think that you've understood the fact that we've got some other options that we can play out there as well, which again should make life pretty comfortable. I think on Saturday afternoon. Just a reminder, folks. Again, I'm sure you're all aware of it, but good just to visit as well. Smart cards are not enabled for the game on Saturday afternoon. You will have received a QR code from Rangers. Please make sure that you've got it to hand. Again, we were just keen to make sure that nobody turns up too early and then realises they can't get in and then join the queue at the ticket office. A 5:30 kickoff on Saturday, Ross. I'm not hugely keen on it myself, but you could have played that game at 8 in the morning. I'm just really excited to go home.
Aye, yeah, that's it. I don't think 5:30 kickoffs are great for us as fans, to be honest. And I'm a massive hypocrite here because if it's a 5:30 in the Premier League, I'm like, oh, this is brilliant, fantastic, a game for me to watch after a 3 p.m. I'm a massive hypocrite when it comes to kickoff times. I freely admit that. But listen, as you're absolutely spot on, you could have played it at 5 in the morning, never mind 5:30 at night. I think we've all been quite excited just to get back to Ibrox. And that is what Saturday's about, getting back into a normal routine of going to Ibrox and watching the Rangers. And it's one of those things that you do just take for granted. Maybe we shouldn't anymore after 2012. But you do get into the habit of taking these things for granted and you don't know what you've got until it's gone. And God knows we have missed it over the past few months. So I'm really, really excited to get back into my own wee pre-match routine on Saturday and hopefully have the result to go hand in hand with that.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, listen, folks, that will do us on Extra for this week. If you'd like to hear loads more fantastic content, not just on Rangers, but the wide world of football in general, plus also some non-football related stuff as well, you can head on over to patreon.com/Heart and Hand, and you can get up to 5 shows for only a few quid a month. It is an absolute bargain. Thank you to our producers, Michael and Paul Myers, but most importantly, thank you so much to my guest this week, Ross Hutton. Ross, the first of many of these shows we'll do across the course of the season. I, for one, can't wait because I always love getting a chance to talk to you, but also because we're hoping that this will be a successful season upon which we can continue to build.
Yeah, and obviously I just want to have a big shout out to our sponsors today, the family and friends of Kieran Tierney. Great contribution that they've made to this episode, and I really want to make their support and appreciation noted. But Cammy, thank you very much for having me on, mate. I always love coming on. It's always great to chat to you. So thanks very much.
I'm saying that we'll talk about it. This could be my last show. This could be me done. So that's it. Yeah, absolutely. But listen, thank you very much for coming on, buddy. And thank you to all of you for listening as well. David will be back with the flagship on Monday to be able to unpack what we're hoping is a fairly convincing and strong win against Dundee as we go into the next round of the League Cup. We'll speak to you all then. Thanks all. Bye-bye.